And good evening, everybody. This is Vicky. Welcome to the VikkiVerse. I am joined by Preston Poulter of Pocket Jacks Comics and Todd DeWolf, the chairman of Fanspeak.
Howdy, howdy.
How
are all of you?
So,
I will just sit here with resting hypocrite face.
Everybody needs a resting hypocrite face. Yeah. Me, I just got a little blue mohawk going. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Todd, since he was the one that requested this stream and this interview with Preston. I'll just act as a little bit of moderator, maybe shove my nose in every once in a while.
There you go.
All right. Sounds good. Well, so I requested this interview with Preston because of, oftentimes he's either on Fanspeak. He's been on Fanspeak before. We've talked to him about Guinevere and the Divinity Factory right off the bat, and it looked good. Actually backed it from that. I received it, and it is good. And so there's a little quick plug right there. And then of course there's a lot of things that have happened, over the course of the time since then. And I thought it would better serve to do this particular interview that I wanted to do again with Preston here, not on the Fanspeak show per se, because of the topic matter and what we're referring to, because we're referring to a lot of information that has popped up here, and that would be that he has a resting hypocrite face, right? And what does that mean to be a hypocrite? But more importantly, what I want to go into is what it means to condone matters. So that's important. We've missed that in the dialogues that I have been reading on Twitter and throughout YouTube on what Preston condones in all of this. So let's see. First off, I'll go ahead and address I think the first subject, and that is just the whole hypocrite matter, because I saw Preston give someone time to interview him and talk about what it means that he is a hypocrite, and it didn't really go anywhere. I don't know if the argument was thin, but I know that individual turned around and they left the show and they went on some great explanation afterwards, and they brought in a lot of people, and there's so much that is talked about ComicsGate. It's in and old ComicsGate, and I guess I should maybe do a little information about who I am and where I've come from on what it means to be kind of the original ComicsGate crowd.
Sure.
So they talk about being high tea, talk about being manly, acting like a man and stuff. And then what I notice is a lot of people will come around and they will bring together a lot of other people. They need qualification, they need validation, they need support. And this is not something that a man who has made something himself, who stands on his own, really has to do. And that's kind of the first point I wanted to make, because it kind of sets apart kind of the different things that are going on within ComicsGate. And there's a lot that's always gone on. We know that ComicsGate originally stemmed from this whole what we call the SJW Matter, the leftists, the agenda-driven politics, whether you virtue signal or pearl clutch, and things like that. And of course, that is still going on in the ComicsGate crowds. We see those exactly those same things. And so I wanted to go ahead.
I have taken to calling them Ethan and Company.
Ethan and Company, and also I believe you call them comic grifters.
I do tend to call them that, yeah.
Yeah. So,
but the thing is, if I say comic grifter, the person on the other side is going to go, no, we're not. But if I go Ethan and Company, they understand who I'm talking about, and that's something that they can kind of agree. That's a more neutral statement, I would say.
Oh, right. Well, there you go. Being neutral is good. I attempt to be neutral. I attempt to be honest and truthful. And that's kind of another reason why I decided to ask you to do this here. And we're going to get down to what it means to condone things. So first and foremost, on this idea of hypocrite.
Yes.
We have seen hypocrite being thrown around recently. And every single person, unless it comes to egregious matters, terrible, nefarious acts, you know, which go up there in the 10 Commandment zone, right? Murder and the like, right? You can call someone, more than likely than not, you can call someone a murderer and probably not be a hypocrite. For the most part. I think a lot of people could fall into that category. But when it comes down to social issues, things in personal life, I think a lot of people throw out something and can even tell someone else that that's not a good thing, and they do it themselves. I can say, hey, drinking is not a good thing. I can still drink. I can say, hey, you shouldn't drink so much.
Exactly.
I can still drink. Drinking's bad for you in time. I can still drink, and that's the difference between, say moderation versus excess. And we do a lot of things in our life that are bad for us. We learn from them. It's part of our experiences that we gain wisdom from it. And during this time frame, we're able to tell someone, hey, don't do that. I know from experience. And I don't do it anymore. And that's not necessarily being a hypocrite, or if you are being a hypocrite, it's being a hypocrite for a good cause. Anything you want to add on that before I just completely get off that subject?
Okay. I mean, it sounds good so far.
Sounds good so far. Yeah. And that's what we've seen. And that's what we've seen here. We've seen you actually do that. And you create a response video to all this other information that has come out about you. And in that, you actually said this was not a good thing. It was my less wise days. I learned from that experience. I did not like that experience.
I mean, I also want to say in the wake of, all this is because, like I pretty much left the kink community behind. But I got to say, now that I'm hanging out with the kink community is full of just crazy people. But now that I'm hanging out in comic books, I'm like, I think the kink people are actually maybe more sane. But I don't know. Like they get together, do freaky stuff, but comic book people are just they're just, oh my God, I mean, at least the ones on Twitter I'm interacting with, they're just full of rage and they want to spurg. So fair. But
at least that other community, they're honest with themselves.
Yeah. So I mean,
at least
there's a fair amount of problem in there too, but yeah, they at least they have their own set of issues. But I did get contacted by some old fans of my work back when I was, the thing that everybody is referring to now. And I gotta say, back then I had some fans, and they were like, you know what, I feel better about me because of you, and I appreciate that. And I did get a couple that is now married that they met because they were fans of the stuff that I was doing with my then wife. So when I look at putting stuff out into the world, I'm like, is this going to make the world a better place? And I know that everybody right now that wants to throw stones at me is like, how could you do this horrible stuff? I'm like, for the market that I was working with, for the group, for the people I was talking to, it was viewed as like nothing but good. So, I made something for this group, and then this group over here, which had no business finding it in the first place, is expressing their displeasure. I'm like, it's none of your damn business. But anyway.
Yeah, precisely. And yeah, that's also something that had come up that I've seen without the Twitterverse, and that is that this is something that you did not bring up.
No.
You can't be blamed for putting this material out in the market. You can't be blamed for trying to use it for something. If you have it over there, you're not using it.
Right.
And so
and I had done my best to to take it down. So right. And people are like, well, you shouldn't have put it. I'm like, I didn't put it there. People had pirated my videos and uploaded them, and they weren't listed under my name or anything. So, the idea that I'm being held responsible for it is, I think, a little silly.
Right. Yeah. Matter of fact, not only are you a hypocrite, and I guess maybe this actually does fall within the word hypocrite again,
right?
But you're actually discussing it, and you said you weren't going to discuss it anymore. So in that regard, maybe you're also a liar. But
I guess, yeah.
Gotcha, journalism.
There you go. There you go.
So anyway, so you are willing to discuss it though, and I mean that right there.
I mean, like I used to be discussing it all the time. So it's kind of it's kind of an old habit, but I probably shouldn't these days because it's a life I've left behind. It's it's not particularly relevant, but I did just want to bring it because I was starting to see people who I hadn't talked to in years who was like, Preston, I can't believe what these people are doing to you. You were, and they're describing me in ways I'm like, I don't know if that's hyperbole or what, but they're just like, you meant so much to us, and you were like, really? Okay, well, thanks for checking in. Whatever. I don't know.
So it's been about 10 minutes of kind of nailing that down, but I thought it was important enough, and at this point you're discussing it, but it's all about clearing the air,
right?
Being honest about the past and making sure what you believe and how it's going to affect you and your business, how it's going to affect your customers, how it's going to affect the rest of the ComicsGate group and people that are around you, and that would include myself because I'm getting into this market. I'm definitely a customer. Got your books, and so does that mean something about me? Am I now on the hook for these types of things? Which if anyone knows me in my personal life, Christian guy. So for me to have conversations with you, then oh no,
right?
Does that drag me down and the like? So and even be friendly with you in this capacity. That's a bad mark for this particular guy.
Well, I mean, is it? I mean, look, I know a fair amount about the Christian faith, and you're supposed to love the sinner, hate the sin kind of stuff. And if you are instead, kind of throwing them out of your community, well, one, you've lost the opportunity to save them, but also it's not good for the community, and when we have to like splinter and divide. The whole, and that's really the magic of capitalism, is that we can come together and you can buy a book from me, and if you like it and I deliver it and you thought the price was good, then you can just keep doing that, even if you don't agree with my personal belief system. And if you look at other societies where they're more homogeneous, they I guess can kind of tend to be a little less capitalistic, a little more communitarian in their outlook. Because, I think if we were like in a hunter-gatherer village, then we would largely be like a communist society. Like some people bring in what they were able to gather, some people bring what they were in to hunt, and we all just share it. But when we have this idea of personal property and we're all in a society, how is that society going to work? And capitalism is really the best, most efficient answer. And capitalism says, you don't really need to worry too much about what that guy believes, and just worry about the product he's offering and be on about your way. So, I don't know.
Oh, that's true. Okay. I was wondering where you're tying that in and see where you went there. Yeah, it's true. Well, actually, since I did bring up Christianity and you spoke on it as well, there is something that I can address, and that is, if you are a Christian,
yes,
within ComicsGate, it's perfectly fine. If you're a Christian in Ethan and Company,
right?
It's not,
right?
From what I've seen, it's frowned upon.
I don't. Yeah,
they pushed away many Christians within that particular group and that's just being honest,
Sure, yeah, and that's, and I've brought this up before, but I think it now bears repeating, is like, what do they stand for other than just Ethan at this point? Because it was supposed to be conservative. Then they ran off all the conservative Christians, and they were just like, we're just going to be kind of homoerotic edgelords. And then they just sat here and just like pearl clutched and kink shamed me, and like dug into my past and spread it everywhere, engaged in revenge porn stuff. I'm like, okay, well, I think you just kind of lost the sex positive freak group. So like, what's left at this point? I don't even know.
Well, and there's something else too, to put it in the comic terms. It's not just the homoerotic nature of what they decided to grasp a hold of.
Right.
A lot of what they do when you're looking at them is the difference between, and I don't want to just point fingers and say this is bad, but if you look at the differences going on now in some of the creators, there is the Lobo creators,
right,
and those that grasp a hold of the way he is, the way he acts. I think another person would be the Merc with the mouth, right? They very much kind of take that as their personalities and go with it. There's another side that is kind of Reed Richards, Charles Xavier, the nice Steve Rogers, nice guys, and Boy Scouts and language. I'm the language guy. I say that on FanSpeak. Hey guys, your language. Right. And so it's just there's different ideas on how to present yourself and present your material, because a lot of the material that's coming out, it also represents these types of ideas, and whether or not it has a good value. I just read Common America.
They like
fun read, and it's different. It's a little bit wow. I'd have to come up with an actual review to talk about it and with the proper wording that I would want to say about it. But young person could read it, and for me,
kind of
the goofy nature of it is perfectly fine. Sure. I don't necessarily need to see blood, guts, gore, and women shamed, which I see a lot of in some of the other stuff. So anyway, moving on, that's a great segue to talk about what we condone, and more particularly what Preston condones.
All right.
Because it's one thing to call him a hypocrite. It's another thing to know what he condones. Well, what does he think? What is this type of thing, okay by him? Because if he's okay with a lot of bad stuff, well, then maybe I don't want to actually associate with him.
Sure.
And what I remember from your response video, and all you got to do is go back a couple of videos of Preston's, and you'll find out he says that I'm not necessarily proud, or I don't like this material. And I think the key point that I grasped a hold of was, I got a daughter.
Yeah.
And I want her to know that she doesn't have to do this, and she shouldn't do this, and that she's a conservative. And being a conservative in my brain means you don't want her to participate in those particular types of behavior, deviant behavior, because it's not healthy for someone, which means you don't condone anyone taking steps of logic for going out and do these things. You want people to make better choices because you've learned from past experience. Am I wrong in that line of logic?
Yeah, I would say that. All right, I think it's difficult to say, here's one set of rules we should all follow, because as I did mention in my video, like Southern Baptists, they kind of got one set of rules that is like, look, let's just follow these rules. But at the same time, in growing up with them and being around with them and talking with a lot of my peers, they don't follow those rules particularly well. Particularly like the young teenagers and whatnot. So it's one thing to say this is what we ought to do. I try to be a little more practical, like I could say you shouldn't smoke, but that being said, I'm like, or you shouldn't drink, but since you're drinking, let's talk about how to limit it, or maybe like maybe consume like lower calorie stuff. So my daughter is she's a conservative, but she's a California conservative, so she's a little bit to the left of Texas, but at the same time she's just very much, I think, feels like the whole socialistic vibe that was going on out there, and the kind of social justice culture. She just finds that completely abhorrent. So that's where we were. But so you were asking if kind of I wanted to kind of come around to one set of rules. I'm gathering is like,
well,
this is good or this is bad.
This past information that's come up about you.
Sure. Yeah.
So I guess the idea is, do you condone it? And more importantly, I think this is the more important part of this,
right,
is do you promote it? Are you going to be promoting it? And do you want all of us to go ahead and accept this type of stuff?
I mean, Guinevere and the Divinity Factory is really, I think, about the quest for an absolute form of morality towards that book, because the problem is when you have this multicultural society where you have some Christians and some Muslims and some kinky atheists and stuff, like, we can't necessarily pass laws and say this is right and you can't do these other things, or if we do, we kind of lose a certain group of society. And coming up with a cookie cutter one size fits all approach for this is what we need to do is difficult. In terms of what I did, is it good or bad? I want to say it's not necessarily the acts themselves, because really, I think, quite frankly, all sex is really disgusting. You know, we just
ask a 6-year-old or a 9-year-old or someone
gross. You know?
starts learning about biology, and you're like, wait a second, so the baby thing comes from the
the where it's gross. It's all gross, you know. So if we want to, like, you know, put a circle around and go, well, these acts, but really, to me, it's more about what are the long-term repercussions of the lifestyle, if you will. And I really think, to me, the most damaging stuff, and this is where I kind of came out as not being in favor of the trans thing. I think men need to be men, and they need to have a good model of masculinity to aspire to. And women need to be women, and they need to have a good model of femininity to aspire to. And that's not to say it needs to be a straitjacket that everyone must be, but I think we at least need to acknowledge, and this is the argument I keep having with people in the kink lifestyle and whatnot, is, okay, you could deviate from that, but at the same time, you have to acknowledge that there's a price to be paid for your deviation. You know, biology kind of favors men to be, you know, kind of strong and out there and dominant, and women tend to want to submit to the, you know, more dominant. That's just in our biology. It's kind of naturally how we bond. And
biology matters.
And if you deviate from that, I think, you know, there tends to be prices that you have to pay. And so I think that just in terms of mathematical efficiency, if you will, ideally we would all be straight and vanilla. That being said, some people are like, well, I can't be. I'm like, okay, well, for you people, you know, you want to at least have to acknowledge that you've kind of deviated off of the ideal, or, you know, the most efficient, I want to say, from the mathematically most efficient way you should be, and that there's going to be a kind of a cost associated with that. So I don't know. Does that answer your question? It's kind of roundabout, I guess. I don't know.
It was roundabout. It was kind of roundabout. So,
well, it's very difficult for me to say this area right here is good and this area right here is bad. It's difficult when you're dealing with the human experience and, you know, all the different variations across that entire spectrum.
I think what I got from that was you're not necessarily promoting this, but you're not going to go out of your way and condemn other people. You just respect others and what they want to do in their own time.
And I mean, back in my more religious.
So you're not agenda driven.
No, exactly. Yeah.
What ComicsGate's all about.
Exactly. And even in my more, you know, religious days of associating with people, you know, like I don't think it's right to say to someone that they need to make a wholesale change, even if someone is just messing up in every area of their life, you know. But if you go, you need to change this, 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 you're doing everything wrong. I think it just overwhelms people. You know what I'm saying? And instead, and you're going to hear me talk about this a lot, I'm really more interested in like the process of how we go from here's, you know, the data that the world's giving you. I did this thing, and then it didn't turn out well. I got fired from my job or whatnot. And gee, that wasn't a good result. And so when you do the data analysis and go, well, gee, maybe I shouldn't do the thing that got me fired. That's where you start to come up with, maybe I should change my behavior. But you have to understand that's like an internal process of I looked out in the world, I saw what was going on, I saw how it was responding to me, and I made the appropriate adjustments. And to me, that's where true wisdom lies. You know what I'm saying? And I've been looking at the concept of virtue. You familiar with that?
No, okay. How you got my attention?
Yeah. And virtue, from a Christian point of view, is I think even then it's a little muddy, but we still kind of have Christians should be this and this and this. But there's another concept of virtue that predates it that I think kind of more resonates with me, and it's Aristotle's, and he was talking about like for him there was it's hard for me to even describe because it's because he didn't come up with a set of rules. He was instead more the idea of the golden mean of a virtuous man is going to kind of be in the middle, and he's going to consider both alternatives in front of him and go, okay, I think this is the right choice here this way. So it's not like one absolute set of rules as much as it is looking at the situation, finding the correct outcome, and following that outcome through in order to bring about a good result. And that's where we can define, well, what is a good result? And for me, it's like, did you leave the world a better place for the actions you've taken?
Yeah. Did you leave the world a better place? Speaking of the world being a better place, boy, I decided I'd go ahead and check chat to see what was going on in the chat, which they're talking a lot about stuff. I can get into this for, I don't mind asking tough questions, hard questions.
Yeah.
Unlike some, because I noticed last time it almost seemed like they were afraid, like brave on Twitter, but not when they can actually talk to you face to face.
Right.
Which I have a concern though. So one of my concerns then is what I've seen in Guinevere's Divinity Factory, what I've seen in White Widow, what these characters turn out to be. I don't necessarily appreciate and like. So is that something that I'm going to continue seeing?
White Widow or White Lily? Because I didn't write White Widow. I just made a cover.
I meant Lily.
Okay, you didn't like White Lily?
It was good. It was good. Okay. I don't believe taking a person from the past and adding a fictitious thing like liking other women is appropriate to someone's character. I know it's fiction. I know you can do it, but I don't like it.
Okay. I mean, if you're going to say you don't like that, then I think that means you don't like the genre of historical drama, because that's what historical drama is.
Oh, it's throwing extra stuff about people into historical references.
Right.
Yeah, every time we
none
go
of that
to a
historical drama
movie, we're watching that happen.
Right.
So.
But none of it has something that completely can change the nature of people from that era and time when stuff like that wasn't as prevalent.
Okay. Well, sure. I don't know what Katya's sexuality was. I really don't know.
Right. And so you pushed something that was out of the norm onto her.
Yes, but there was a description I read that when she was in her flight suit, she looked just like one of the guys. So I took from that, like, man, she might have been a little butch. But two, I have to sit back and go, well, what's going to make the best story? And one thing that, and particularly when I was writing White Lily, this was like 4 years ago, or a little more, I really felt like the United States was becoming more fascinated with communism and socialism and just Marxism in general, and kind of down on capitalism. And so I wanted to tell a story that took place under communism, because that made for a better way to talk about it. And this was also when, like the whole transgender thing was being pushed, which I think it still is. And you had the concepts of, well, what about them in the military? And so having a gay character in that time, I now get to talk about that gays were persecuted in the Soviet Union, as well as women in the military. And it allowed for me to, take these elements and go, okay, I think this was a better story. Now, I mean, in general, I can't promise you there's not going to be more girls kissing in more comic books in the future. I mean, there very well might. And if that squicks people, I understand. I don't know what to say.
All right. That's a fair answer.
Okay.
So And there is one thing. So on to all this hateful activity. I'm going to change the subject a little bit.
All right, go ahead.
On to all this hateful activity, and you get blamed for it, and other people get blamed for it. And
I don't know how I could get blamed for it. I mean, I think if you're blaming me, people are crazy.
You get blamed,
right?
Even if you're not doing it,
right?
You know, we've seen this on the Democrat left. Mm-hmm. Okay, but Trump does this, Trump does that, Trump does this, and then we find out, we roll things back, we find out the truth, and we go, oh look, everything that the left side is pointing the finger about, it's all self-diagnosis. Right. They have been stuffing the ballot box. They have been the ones dealing with Ukraine. They've been the ones dealing with Russia. And when you're dealing with SJW types,
always blame the opponent for that which you were guilty. Yeah.
Yes, and this is just one of those areas we constantly see that it keeps popping up from the Ethan and company. And there's one thing about Ethan, I would like to address Ethan just for a moment, because of everything that happens, and that is that I find abhorrent. We talk about what is bad, and this whole conversation has been about that. What do you condone? What's bad? Does all this even mean something? Is it? Are you a bad person? Can you be associated with? There's an association that has been going on that Ethan makes for himself that I find absolutely abhorrent, and it's not just me that finds it this way. It's the big guy himself, and you'll see it right in Scripture. And there's for me, it is a righteous anger. And I get absolutely incensed when Ethan brings up the name of Jesus. And I know you don't do that. You at least don't say, hey, I got Jesus behind me and he's with me. As I go attack a bunch of people, as I go ahead and I'm out here tearing people down, as I'm doing homoerotic and stuff like this, he then tacks on, yay, praise Jesus and stuff. And Jesus is with me. And this is wrong, sir. Absolutely, sir. And I say that, okay, when I use the term sir, I guess I'm talking to you, because I would not say that about Ethan. In this particular regard, 2 Timothy 2:19 says, but God's firm foundation stands, bearing this seal, the Lord knows those who are his, and let everyone who names the name of the Lord depart from iniquity. Everything that this guy does against people and this hateful malice towards others is inequity. And you would not do this if you were bringing up the name of Jesus. That is a false representation. And as a Christian myself, I don't always do the Christian walk. I'm not always able to be righteous. And when I'm not, I say, I'm sorry for that. I'm not acting appropriately. And when I am able to do something right, I say it's because of him. And he's what enables me to do better things. And in this particular person, it just drives me into anger. And here's the thing. I know totally that there is justice, that I don't have to deal with it. I can let that anger go, and I don't have to be mad about it, because there's a point, Ethan, where you'll have to face him whose name you invoke. And he will look at you, and you will know everything you've done. And that judgment will come. And you can sit back, and you can be arrogant, and you can be narcissistic in your own little ways and say, but I'm great, and I'm wonderful, and I'm humble. Jesus knows. And it will come. There's a day. We all face that day. And I want to go ahead and I had this little miniature forum at this moment. So one thing I think that few people are talking. No one's talking about that. And many people are Christian here in this group, have some Christian values. I wanted to address it. I wanted to say it. It is abhorrent the way he acts, and then brings up Jesus. So anyway, get that off my chest and let that go.
One thing I did want to say in regards to White Lily, there's only one sex scene in the entire story, and when I wrote the screenplay, I didn't even really spend much time on it because I figured that would be a decision that people would make later if the movie got made. You know, you would decide when you're making the movie, what did you want the rating to be, or how wholesome were you targeting more of a fan. And so to me, that seemed like a producer decision when I wrote it. But then when I'm actually making the comic book, I'm like, well, I guess, you know, why not? Yeah. So, okay. But if you just remove like those 2 pages out of the, you know, 100 and however many page story, you know, probably 110, 120 page story, it's going to end up being on straight paperback. You know, then it becomes about a woman who, you know, has a desire for, you know, the same gender, but at the same time, she instead chooses an outlet of the military where she feels she can be the most productive, as opposed to society where she doesn't feel she can fit in. So it becomes, I think, a message that Christians could go along with if you just cut those 2 pages out.
Well, sure. And you know what, I want to tack on to that.
Sure.
With another addendum of my own. And that's very easily, a lot of people know John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his only son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have eternal life. But my favorite verse is actually the one that comes after that, John 3:17. For God did not send his son into the world to condemn the world, but in order that the world might be saved through him.
Cool.
So as much as I can come out here and I can go ahead and you know, we can condemn people, we can shout at Preston, we can turn around also and say, you know what, Preston does things and he puts things out there, but he can always go to Christ, and each and every one of you can go to Christ. And I would hope that you would accept Jesus into your heart while I'm here and I'm talking about this, and pray that prayer and go to a pastor and a local preacher and get baptized. So I'll put that out there. So and of course that condemnation then is what is not there for White Lily, like you were saying, that she can be accepted and forgiven, etc., etc.
And that, I think, was the crux of it, which was, this was, you know, the communist society had rejected religion in all forms, and yet you know, they were still, you know, oppressing gay people. And you know, there's the argument, I feel, is that it's really the free market, as opposed to either religion or Marxism, which has brought about more equality between those who we would define as normal and those we would define as deviants, because it's the free market that instead gets us off of the more community-based stuff. Because again, if we're in a village and we're all bringing in food and we're divvying up our resources, it becomes are you good enough to be here? Are you good enough to receive the bounty that we are providing for everybody? Maybe you're not, you know. But if it's instead a free market, it's, you're not giving me stuff because you like me. You're giving me stuff because I'm offering you things of value. And so that's where it's maybe you don't agree with my lifestyle or my decisions, but I'm still here. I'm contributing in my labor and these wonderful things I'm providing for you. And if you like them, you buy them, and you know, the same for me. And so it gets the focus off of, are you good enough? And instead looks at, what are you contributing to society, which is where I think the focus should be. Yeah,
it's true. Wow, communism and capitalism and stuff. That is very today. Socialism, these kids, which is funny because not only is it socialism and how we're all one big community, but except for you guys.
Right.
that's part of it. Well, you can't use those words, and you know, I need my safe space and whatnot, and you just can't have that. That's ridiculous.
Yeah. So I mean, to me, I view, and you know, like I know that certainly I don't expect religious people to agree, because if you're religious, presumably you believe that everyone should be of that religion and that the world will be a better place, and that's cool and stuff. But you know, I look at history, and you know, Christianity itself has gone through a number of different flavors throughout the last 2,000 years. Some of them have been pretty hip and groovy. Sometimes they've gotten a little bit off on the wrong foot. But
Oh yeah, those guys that point the finger and run people down and do the Inquisition and do it in the name of Jesus. Those guys. Exactly. I hate people like that. Did I just go over that?
But and again, if we look at where Christianity went wrong over its history with like the Spanish Inquisition and whatnot, it would again to me say it was coming back to this kind of community-minded agenda of we have to purge the undesirables from our ranks. We have to get rid of the heretics. And that's where I think everything goes wrong. And that's where I think I was a bit more resistant before, when we were like, can we just agree on one absolute code of right and wrong? Because once you agree on one absolute code of right and wrong, then it invites you to go, and what should we do with the people who don't comply with the set of standards we came up with? And I really feel that that tends to lead to bad things historically. And I'm more of a champion of the idea of free markets and capitalism itself. I mean,
well, then that's true Christianity. Maybe when you go back to Jesus himself,
right. Yeah,
he wanted there to be people to be free. Mm-hmm. That's why he did what he did, mm-hmm. and you have the option. And that's that. I mean, what other religions are like that?
Right. So when
you look at how it's been abused, you know, the whole Christianity thing throughout history, that's one thing. Jesus himself, though, you know, he also did not throw stones.
Right.
He said, don't throw stones. You know, all you guys, you know, without sin, throw stones. Mm-hmm. They all walked away. You know, what I'm seeing now, I'm seeing a whole bunch of villagers throw stones.
Right.
And, you know, and it doesn't make any sense. And then, of course, invoke the name of Jesus, and it drives me batty.
Oh, I hate that stuff too. So I guess if there's one thing I'm here to proselytize for, it's for free markets and capitalism. That's what I am.
That has been what you keep going back to, free market and capitalism.
Coming back to over and over again, yeah.
And that's exactly, of course, that's exactly old school CG,
right?
Which some people are talking about that. So that is where I came from. I started doing this when there was a EBS, a Mike Miller, mm-hmm. And a before even a Doug,
right.
And the Red Rooster guy, Mitch. Mm-hmm. So back then it was really only three guys.
Right.
And then, you know, Chester and Denali and myself, we got together. We said, hey, they're doing some streams. They're talking about stuff. We want to, there's a lot going on in the chat. It's hard to get information out. Let's do a show ourselves, and let's talk about not just comic books, some other things outside of comic and the comic realm, the movies, and we'll talk about ComicsGate. And ComicsGate, then it did become so toxic. You'll notice we got off of talking ComicsGate because of the toxicity.
And that's where, again, I would point to it's one of these classic problems that you observe in, you know, kind of free market societies. When you have something that has been deemed to not be ownable, like, for instance, if, you know, for instance, the government goes, you can't own the river. The river is for everybody. People have this motivation to now just go dump stuff in the river because, well, it's not, they don't have to worry about it, you know? Mm-hmm. In libertarian circles, it's known as the fallacy of the commons. And, you know, this, you know, dates back to medieval history and whatnot, where, you know, there were some areas that were just designated the commons, and because it belonged to everybody, nobody took care of it. No one was responsible for it. It just became something that was abused and dumped. And when ComicsGate became, well, it belongs to everybody, then that meant any horribly, you know, amoral grifter could just step in and do whatever manner of abuse, like what's happening to me right now. And people couldn't go, wait, but you're not ComicsGate. I'm like, no, it belongs to nobody. Therefore, you can't say that. And so instead, this hashtag became dominated by the lowest common denominator, who were using the most reprehensible tactics.
And it didn't stand for anything other than that.
And now we're going to see a transformation because someone is responsible for it. It's me. You know, I own the hashtag now, and I'm going to be like, here's the standards. If you want to be ComicsGate, you have to meet these standards. And if you don't, you're not. And the standards don't apply to consumers. They only apply to creators. You know, I'm not out to certify whether Vicki's ComicsGate or not. In fact, I don't really want to be talking too much about people. Instead of, I want to be talking about their projects. Like, is this, is this going to be under the ComicsGate label, part of the ComicsGate shared universe? And now there's this beauty and elegance. Why? Because there's a design, there's gatekeeping, there's somebody going, this is what it is. There's a set of standards that we all must follow. There are boundaries. And if you step away from those and you're just instead left with this muddled mess of, well, it kind of is, it means whatever you want when the time you say it, much like, socialism got banned. But, like, I would ask people what socialism meant. I would get all these different definitions, There was always that it's not real socialism or whatever. Yeah. So it's when you step away from a set of standards and you're just in this muddled mess, it invites chaos.
Right. Yeah. It did. It became chaotic, and so it became hard to talk about. And so fanspeak has morphed a little bit. We still talk about comics. We still bring up a lot of different projects and the like too.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Awesome. So.
True. Well, it kind of hammered out everything there.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I do have one more thing that I've got to bring up.
Okay.
I finished on a personal note.
Yeah.
I finished putting together a little gadget here. There went the stand.
Okay.
So this is the Lego. What's that?
Is that the Mir space station? What is that?
That's the International Space Station.
Oh,
very cool.
It is gigantic. So why is that important? Because Wednesday, 3:00, Florida time.
Right.
We're going to have the first American launch from an American company, from American soil, of American crew members since 2011.
Mm-hmm.
We've been sending our astronauts over to Russia. They've been going up to Soyuz, and now we're back to more America.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also SpaceX that is sending up Crew Dragon. Mm-hmm. And so SpaceX is doing this. It falls in line there with capitalism. Elon Musk is pushing this thing. It's awesome. So we can get more America back into space. America's space program started. I'm excited about it, and I just want to go ahead and throw this out there. Hopefully, you guys can get excited about it, and we can watch live and see Americans go up from American soil again.
Fantastic.
And before we leave, we did have one question from the chat for you, Todd. What kind of wood is your China hutch?
It was gifted from a grandparent. So I'm not exactly sure. And there's also another question is, what am I the chairman of? That's what I'm referred to on fanspeak. For various reasons here and there. You get names, you get nicknames, it just happens. And so that's what I'm the chairman of fanspeak. Doing the chairman address is usually one subject that I try to nail down within 2 to 3 minutes, and then we move on with the show.
Okay. If anybody has anything to pitch, where can they find you, Todd?
I have been, except for recently, I have been on fanspeak. It's over on Chester Busby's channel, and he's the one guy that leads that went ahead and took the show for us. And so I've not been there recently. There's the whole COVID thing. I got my work schedule was moved, and so I haven't been able to be on fanspeak. Also, occasionally when before the schedule changed, I was also with RT Bear on the Pontificators. So you can just see what I've got to say, my opinions, and obviously I have my opinions, and I am willing to put them straight out there.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, you all know Preston Poulter from Pocket Jacks Comics. He can be found on YouTube at Pocket Jacks Comics and on Twitter. And there's
a real popular figure to talk about all the time.
He currently has an active campaign on Indiegogo. So go ahead and check that out. And it was for...
I have both White Lily 4, which White Lily 5 I'm wrapping up here on on Kickstarter. The very first officially ComicsGate trademark book. So it's pretty exciting. Pick that up from the printer on Tuesday or Wednesday and get those out in the mail, as well as submit that to the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office as proof of claiming the mark. And then we're going to launch a main campaign for White Lily 5 on Kickstarter after that. So probably in like 2 or 3 weeks. But meanwhile, you know, if you're just hankering for stuff right now, or you want to buy the books before White Lily 5, they're on Indiegogo. So I have White Lily 4 is up on Indiegogo, as is Guinevere and the Divinity Factory 2, and a custom cover of White Widow I did. So you can all find that over on Indiegogo.
Well, excellent. Everybody have a great night. Thank you both for being on my channel. I appreciate it. So thanks a lot. Good night, everybody.
Bye.
Yeah.